So, I mean, they had a system that accounted for mixture all the way down to like the 32nd. It was a very elaborate system. So you had mulattoes, you had quadroons, you had octoroons, you had mestizo, mestiza, mestizaje, all kinds of stuff to kind of understand all of these differences and mixtures. But what is it about the mixed person, about the mulatto, that is so important for us today? Well, the importance of the mulatto, or of the racially mixed person, is that the mixed person begins to reveal something about who we believe ourselves to be. And what I'd like to do is share a brief poem that was shared with me, entitled Mulatto. It was written by Langston Hughes. And what I'm going to read it for us. And as you listen, I want you to hear the kind of levels of contestation. And what I mean by this is that there is disagreement about who people are. There are things that each person in the poem wants and desires. There are things in the poem that people are refusing and resisting. So listen for the resistance in the midst of this. I am your son, white man, George at dusk in the turpentine woods. One of the pillars of the temple fell. You are my son like hell. The moon over the turpentine woods, the southern night full of stars. Great big yellow stars. What's a body but a toy? Juicy bodies of nigger wenches, blue, black against black fences. Oh, you little bastard boy, what's a body but a toy? The scent of pine wood stings the soft night air. What's the body of your mother? Silver moonlight everywhere. What's the body of your mother? Sharp pine scent in the evening air. A nigger night, a nigger joy. A little yellow bastard boy. Nah, you ain't my brother. Niggers ain't my brother. Not ever. Niggers ain't my brother. The southern night is full of stars. Great big yellow stars. Oh, sweet as earth, dusk dark bodies give sweet birth to little yellow bastard boys. Get on back there in the night, you ain't white. The bright stars scatter everywhere. Pine wood scent in the evening air. A nigger night, a nigger joy. I am your son, white man, a little yellow bastard boy. What is at stake between these two? Between the son and his white father? Why this assertion of paternity, of kinship? What is going on here in this poem and what occurred over and over again in European encounters with the New World was the difficulty of sustaining race as a biological fact. So what is happening here but the son is trying to assert his identity, assert his belonging. I am your son, like hell you are. Why can the father not account for this? He cannot account for this because his life to assent, to say, yes, you are my son, is to do what? But to accept, make public the fact that he desired dark bodies. That he desired a kind of intimacy with something which should have been foreign, distant, dirty, less than him. To assent to his kinship is to suggest a kind of equality that threatens the very idea of what whiteness is. Now notice there's a couple really interesting passages here. One is this allusion to the temple. One of the pillars of the temple fell. And what's really interesting about Hughes, and when you begin to look at the ways that people talk about race not in strictly biological terms, not in strictly social terms, but in fact, race itself, especially in the South, in the United States, has a deeply religious character to it. There are laws, so anti-miscegenation laws, black codes, where you can go, where you can't go. There is a sacrificial system. Between roughly 1890 and 1920, over 5,000 African Americans were lynched. Why? Because they crossed these boundaries, right? But there's also a kind of transcendent ideal about what it means that we should be, and that is to be a white person in the promised land. Race is not about biology. It is not merely a social construction, but rather it is about a form of life that we slowly live into. We slowly adopt and take on ourselves, believing certain things about ourselves, believing certain possibilities about ourselves. Now, in contemporary moments, this is not solely the business of white folk. But in fact, in response to the power of whiteness, minorities have also had to assert their identities. We are African American, black and proud, right? In the United States, Asian Americans, their identities have begun to coalesce around an identity of Asian American rather than, say, Korean or Chinese. Why? Because they're trying to respond to this power of whiteness, this power of assertion. These bodies, these beautiful bodies that seem different than them. And so the process of assimilation, citizenship, all of these things are ways that race kind of slowly works into our identity, such that in our contemporary society, we are not racists. We are people who want to live in this neighborhood and not that neighborhood. We want to marry these people and not those people. And it's perfectly natural because it's just how God made us. We're just different people. Now, what the interracial person does is the interracial person disrupts that logic. They become an interruption, a disruption. They are the bastard boy knocking on the door saying, I am your son. It requires us to rethink our kinship, rethink our desires, rethink our hopes. So the interracial person becomes this kind of space that resists the power of whiteness. How does it resist it? But by trying to, in a sense, bring all of it. It tries to be both. It tries to be whole. So this is what the first chapter begins to think a little bit about, this problem of race, and how interracial bodies really reveal something about what it is that we believe about ourselves. The second chapter thinks a little bit about how do interracial people themselves navigate and negotiate these realities. And there's a really interesting little subset of literature. It's called passing literature. And by passing literature, they mean it is a group of people, usually African Americans, who are fair enough, light enough, to literally pass as white. They look white. And it's really interesting. In all of these kind of fictional accounts, there's almost a kind of conversion experience, right? They leave the place of death and darkness, their old life, forsake their families, in order to step into the promised land. What is the promised land? White life, opportunity, jobs, education, all of these kinds of things. But there's one problem in the midst of this. In all of these accounts, the person who passes always dies. It's so sad. Always. They get, one of them, like in one story, Nita Larson's passing, phenomenal book. She gets pushed, jumps, I'm not really sure, out the window. At the end of the day, she's dead at the bottom of an apartment. James Weldon Johnson's autobiography of an ex-colored man, exiled, regretting, literally shriveling in France. Langston Hughes' Mulatto shoots himself. I mean, it's tragic. And what one of these authors are trying to suggest is that this kind of self-delusion, this kind of splitting oneself in half is not sustainable. We always die. In a sense, the world will not allow this mixed figure to exist. Why will it not let this mixed figure exist? Because we are always resisting these interruptions. Why? We are resisting these interruptions because we want to hold on to this idea of purity, this idea of certainty about who we are, about who we belong to. And God forbid we have someone who claims that not only are they a part of me,